You will not believe the stunt this UFO abduction movie pulled. They should have known they would be sued after what they did, and the lawsuits did come. This is the true story behind the alien abduction movie, The Fourth Kind.
The Fourth Kind is a pseudo-documentary released in 2009. The film starts with actress Milla Jovovich addressing the audience, claiming that the movie is real and will be using archival footage that had been previously unseen to help tell the story of alien abductions in Nome, Alaska. The archival footage is often shown side by side with the so-called reenactment. They're using hypnosis to help the abductees figure out what exactly happened to them during their abduction. Whenever they would get to the deep point of the hypnosis where they were encountering the alien life forms, the camera would go all fuzzy and you really couldn't see too much, and just really hearing a lot of screams. To help promote this film, Universal created a fake website, and they used made-up articles about UFOs and abductions around Nome, Alaska, and passed them off as appearing in real-life Alaskan newspapers. The papers weren't happy, and they sued Universal. They ended up settling on a $20,000 lawsuit, and Universal had to contribute to a scholarship. The city of Nome was also very unhappy with this movie. The mayor claimed that people need to realize that this was just for fun. There actually was no alien abductions. And yes, a lot of people go missing in Alaska, but it's mostly because of climate, weather, and wildlife.
The Fourth Kind does try something really cool that no horror movie I've ever seen has tried before. It combined the subject of alien abductions with spirituality. And they try to ground the alien abduction story in actual ancient history. The tagline of the film is, "What do you believe? You decide." But if you don't know much about the history behind the film that inspired the aliens here, then you'll miss the most interesting questions that this film is trying to pose. So let's fix that right now. The language spoken in the film by the aliens is actually identified as ancient Sumerian. In her search for answers, Abigail finds a book on Sumerian religion. At first, the movie seems to propose that the oldest religious stories in the world about Sumerian gods are actually stories about aliens, or so it seems. Key phrase, seems to. Just like the tagline, "What do you believe?" the movie is going to put forward more than one theory about aliens for you to choose from, if you wish. It's just not very obvious at first. Option 1. If you pause the film and read the book that she has, you can actually see the name of the god Anu on one of the pages. He was believed to be the supreme god in Sumerian religion who ruled over a divine council of lower gods called the Anunnaki. You might be familiar if you know much about the show Ancient Aliens. That's a clue to who Dr. Odusama believes the aliens might be. The movie teases a theory that a few authors have popularized in real life, most famously Zecharia Sitchin, that the Sumerian gods were real space aliens who created humans and now perform research on us. In fact, Sitchin thinks these same aliens appear in the Bible as the mysterious Nephilim giants, like Goliath. In Sumerian history, some of the Sumerian gods weren't friendlies either. The real Sumerian tablets shown in the film say that the Anunnaki gods got sick of working and growing their own food, so they held a meeting with Anu and decided to create humans as their slaves. It's also true that the tablets have a flood story similar to Noah's Ark. The evil Anunnaki gods couldn't sleep because humans were too loud, so they kill us all with a flood. That old story is very ripe for a scary movie premise. The film doesn't necessarily say God is an evil alien either. They're subtly going to present a counter theory in a single line of dialogue near the end of the film. But first, fact check. Were the Sumerian gods really aliens? That theory is not supported by most scholars, but I do think it's fun when a movie plays with real history or current theories, and what they did here is frightening in the film. I've actually read the Sumerian stories myself, and 4 of the most famous peer-reviewed research papers on them. The Sumerian gods were not described as physical beings. They were described as spirits who managed the affairs of humans, but they ruled in the heavens and in the underworld. Sumerian scholars don't really think they traveled on rockets or wore astronaut suits either, but it does make for a fun story. Fact check. Are the Sumerian stories actually older than the biblical book of Genesis? Sort of. The writings that we have are older than Genesis, but here's the key. Both stories actually originate from the era of storytelling before people actually wrote things down on a regular basis. So it's pretty difficult to prove with evidence which story really came first. Fact check. Did the Genesis creation story really come from the Sumerian creation story? Again, sort of. The biblical creation story does contain references to the Sumerian story, but it doesn't actually borrow from it, it's actually critiquing the Sumerian story, a recognized ancient writing style called a polemic. The movie also fudges the date of the Sumerian stories a little bit. They use the dates of the artwork to make it seem like the stories of Sumerian sky gods were written in 4000 BC, but the Sumerian writings actually date to somewhere closer to around 2000 to 2500 BC, just a few hundred years before the oldest book of the Bible. But the film presents an alternative viewpoint for you to think about too. Here's the key. In Dr. Abigail's interview at the end of the film, she says the alien she spoke with cannot be God, but it can pretend to be. That exact idea actually comes from the Old Testament, that other gods, better known as angels, tried to trick humans by posing as God, which is exactly what we see in the film during Abigail's final abduction. There is also a modern theory that alien abductions are actually a spiritual encounter with demons, which has been backed up by some Harvard research. At least there's a loose correlation that I find interesting. The alien in the film even mentions prayer. So is this an alien movie? Or is this a movie about evil Sumerian gods or demons pretending to be God? I don't even know. Is it saying they're all one and the same? I think the film is asking you to decide on an interpretation for yourself. What they present here is pretty intriguing. The Fourth Kind is a fairly scary film, but if you believe in ancient aliens or spiritual beings or demons, it's even more disturbing.
In the realm of cinema, the allure of a story based on true events can significantly enhance a film's appeal, drawing audiences eager to explore narratives grounded in reality. However, is that really a good idea? For instance, in this movie, we talked about that they went through lawsuits. They had to pay $20,000 plus an extra $1,500 or so for a college scholarship just because they lied about this being true events and put out fake news articles. What else has happened when it comes to cases like this? The movie Fargo was alleged to be based on true events, and to the point where somebody actually traveled to Fargo and started walking around with a metal detector looking for this buried treasure that was allegedly never found. Come to find out, it was all fake. This guy was so embarrassed that he ended up killing himself over it. So again, you can see how things like that could possibly exploit. In other cases where based on true events completely goes overboard, movies like Amityville Horror. That movie was totally out in left field from what really allegedly happened. And it was so bad to the point where the owners of the house at one point literally picked the house up and turned it. So the window that's significant to that movie was not facing the street. So it was much harder to find. Of course, once the internet hit, anyone can find it. But again, because of a movie that was allegedly based on true events came out, these people's lives were flipped upside down because of it. So you got to ask yourself, is it good to come out and say these are based on true events just to get ticket sales, but ultimately be a lie? We can talk about that another time.
We're going to be discussing this film live 1 week from today, next Monday. So if you want to join us, we'll talk about your comments on the live stream. But if you want to analyze one of the most famous UFO films of all time and the hidden symbolism it contains, Watch this video next.